Lydia Yusupova has suffered torture due to her brave efforts to document human rights violations, defending the victims of the war in Chechnya. Buddhist patriarch T. Kwan Do spent over 30 years in prison for his struggle for human rights. He passed away in 2020 after all those years in captivity.
I am isolated, but I am not alone. I am part of the Rafto family.
At the Rafto House, thousands are educated annually. The mission is to create awareness about human rights and democracy. 30 organizations and individuals have received the Rafto Prize for Human Rights. The Rafto Foundation aims to provide long-term support and joint projects among laureates who face similar challenges.
The prize empowers, it's very empowering, gives a sense of protection.
We need this recognition. We need this empowerment. We need somebody to hold our back.
This prize is a sign that we are not alone.
We know that despite dedicating our entire lives to this work, that we might not see change. Our children might not see this change. We do it because it's the right thing to do.
As you can see, the Rafto Prize has been awarded to individuals and organizations worldwide since its birth in 1987. Throughout the years, we have been honoring and shedding light on human rights advocates and organizations from all parts of the world. From Frank Mugisha in Uganda, who's fighting tirelessly for the human rights of sexual minorities, to Human Rights Data Analysis Group in California, who's been documenting human rights violation at grand scale in order to keep bring justice to victims and their families and hold leaders accountable. Together, our laureates form a diverse geographical and thematic family of human rights defenders. And our goal is to support their work in a way that benefits their cause and the important work they do. Last year, in September, we stood here and announced that the Rafto Prize went to Defense for Children International Palestine for their work for the rights of children under occupation in the occupied Palestinian territories. Unfortunately, their work has since then only become more important. And in a war that is still ongoing in Gaza and an increasing tension in the West Bank, they are documenting on a daily basis gross human rights violations against children and civilians. It was a special moment last year in November when we had Rafto Award ceremony in Bergen, and a record number turned out to show their solidarity with Defense for Children International Palestine in the Torchlight Parade. Have a look at this.
The world is witnessing one of its most profound and defining moments in our collective memory.
will take the stage behind me here and read the Prize Committee's statement to all of you who are watching. Please stay tuned as we are counting down the last few minutes. Thank you.
The Rafto Prize 2024 is awarded to Cuban artist and human rights defender Luis Manuel Otero Alcantara for his fearless opposition to authoritarianism through art. Currently in prison, Otero Alcantara has been arrested countless times for his activism. His artistic expression is unflinchingly critical of restrictions on freedom of expression. As a leader of the San Isidro movement, a collective of artists, musicians, journalists, and academics, he has been at the forefront of a movement seeking change since its start in 2018. I will now read a quote by Otero Alcantara. "I love art and freedom above everything else, and the Cuban regime is taking away those two things from me. To the dictator on duty, I call upon him to yield within his macho structure, because in the end, reason is on our side. This is not a struggle between machos. We are artists repressed by a dictator who refuses to yield due to a machista and patriarchal structure that prevents him from recognizing that the opponents are right." End quote. Luis Manuel Otero Alcantara is a 36-year-old self-taught Afro-Cuban artivist. He comes from a poor and marginalized neighborhood in Havana and uses sculptural and performance art to protest against violations of freedom of expression. Otero Alcantara's sculptures combine materials found in collapsed buildings and waste containers to create human forms, animals, and comic book characters, reflecting an ironic form of social and political criticism. His performance art has involved interventions in popular public spaces, displaying the artworks to be seen by all, in defiance of regulations. The performance piece Garrotte Ville from 2021 references a weapon used to strangle a person as a means of torture, dating back to the 17th century. In the performance, Otero Alcantara remained seated for many hours with its hands bound by a garrote, a metaphor for the repression of freedom of expression in Cuba. Otero Alcantara is the general coordinator of the San Isidro movement, a constellation of artists, musicians, journalists, and academics promoting freedom of expression. The movement was established in 2018 as a reaction to Decree 349, which requires artists to obtain advance permission for public and private exhibitions and performances. It is one of the legal instruments used by the Cuban government to silence artists, musicians, and performers who are critical of their policies. Otero Alcantara also co-founded the Museum of Dissidents, together with Yanelis Núñez Leiva in 2016. It chronicles the long line of people who have opposed those in power in Cuba, recontextualizing the figure of the dissent and showing the necessity of political pluralism on the island. It also seeks to promote and produce new curatorial structures through poetry readings, film exhibitions, books, and workshops. Otero Alcantara participated in the music video for the hip-hop song Patria y Vida, meaning homeland and life, released in February 2021. A twist on the national slogan from the birth of the Cuban Revolution, Patria o Muerte, meaning homeland or death. The song gained wide popularity and won the Song of the Year award of the 2021 Latin Grammy Awards. According to the organization Artists at Risk connection. Patria y Vida is possibly the most direct criticism ever made of the Cuban regime. The song played a significant role in the rise of the protests that took place on 11 July 2021. These nationwide protests were the largest anti-government demonstrations since the 1959 Cuban Revolution and came in response to the long-standing economic crisis, shortages of essential goods, and severe restrictions on rights in the country. In response to the protests, the government imprisoned more than 1,000 people and committed systematic human rights violations, including the use of arbitrary detention and torture. Otero Alcantara's artivism has come at a high personal cost. Since 2016, he has been the subject of interrogations and political persecution, and has been arrested countless times. His art has been confiscated and destroyed by security state officers. Despite this, he continued his artivism through performance pieces to raise awareness of Cuba's ongoing repression of independent artists and activists. He was detained on July 11, 2021, after posting a video online of his planned participation in the protests. In 2022, he was convicted for contempt, public disorder, and insults to national symbols, the last of these due to his performance Drapeau in August 2019. He is currently serving a 5-year sentence in the maximum security prison, Guana J, in the Artemisa province. Otero Alcantara and his fellow activists, including one of the artists behind Patria y Vida, Michael Castillo, did not receive an open and fair trial, and the conditions they are exposed to in prison entail grave psychological and physical risks. Otero Alcantara spearheads a new generation of independent Cuban voices, using creative forms of resistance to challenge the authoritarian regime. Like many artists before him, his art and civic position push the limits of freedom of expression in the face of censorship and repression. He follows a proud Cuban tradition of opposition through art. From the poetry of José Martí, who was the voice of independence from the colonial power of Spain, through the seized films of Tomás Gutiérrez Alea during the Batista dictatorship, to the prose of Reinaldo Arenas, who suffered the homophobia of the early decades of the current regime, and to the scathing hip-hop by Los Adelanos after the turn of the century. Since the communist revolution of 1959, Cuba has been a one-party authoritarian state. After the governance of Fidel and Raúl Castro, the Communist Party has continued to reign through the current president, Miguel Díaz-Canel. Cuba has long been one of the countries with the least freedom of expression in the world. It was ranked 168 of 180 countries on Reporters Without Borders 2024 World Press Freedom Index, positioned between Belarus and Iraq. In an already limited political and civic space, the government responded to the widespread protest of 2021, legitimately calling for broader economic and political reforms with an iron fist. According to Amnesty International, at least 793 people remained in detention at the end of 2023, following the massive arrests during the protests. Human Rights Watch has documented torture and ill treatment of prisoners. The brutal suppression of the 2021 protests sparked a mass exodus of Cubans, as thousands were forced into exile for fear of persecution. The Cuban authorities enacted a new social communication law in 2023, which further clamps down on media freedom and restricts public access to information. In a country where the national constitution already bans non-state media, independent media have emerged online, but now face severe restrictions. The attack on artists and the right to freedom of expression is not limited to Cuba. As authoritarian regimes tighten their grip on power, artists who question existing power structures are under extreme threat. According to UNESCO, 39 artists were killed and 119 imprisoned in 2021, which is the highest number on record. Expressing oneself through art is a basic human right. Throughout history, artists have tested the boundary of freedom of expression and challenged authorities on other human rights, often at huge personal risk. For a decade, Luis Manuel Otero Alcantara has directly confronted censorship and the institutional denial of his status as an artist, despite harsh government crackdowns. His work shows the power of art in resisting authoritarianism and is an inspiration to others in the artistic community. The Rafto Prize 2024 aims to highlight the importance of the work of Luis Manuel Otero Alcantara and other artists in challenging power structures and defending democracy and human rights, both in Cuba and globally. We call on the Cuban government to free Luis Manuel Otero Alcantara and all political prisoners, to repeal Decree 349 and other laws criminalizing opposition and artistic expression, to adhere to international law and the Convention on the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, and to stop the persecution of artists and human rights defenders. As authoritarianism is on the rise internationally, artists are crucial in fostering public debate, encouraging critical thinking, and defending civic space. We appeal to states and institutions worldwide to promote and protect artistic freedom. Thank you.
Finally, we have revealed through the
voy para Malecón, me cueste lo que me cueste, me voy
lo que
para
hacemos es arte. Lo que hacemos es querer poner a Cuba en el siglo XXI y ellos quieren tener a Cuba en una dictadura de los años 50. Y es donde nosotros como artistas estamos conectados y decidimos apostar nuestro arte, nuestras vidas, por la libertad creativa, por la libertad del arte, pero por la libertad de todos los cubanos, que significa yo poder traducir, yo poder representar en mi arte las dolencias, las miserias que se viven en Cuba y se viven en cualquier lugar del mundo. Lo que pasa es que me tocó Cuba como territorio. Sincronizarnos todos juntos, o cada uno en sus diferencias, en sincronizar el barco, perfilarlo en pro de la democracia y la Cuba que queremos.
Hola, ¿qué tal, alumnos? Pues esta es la noticia del día. Ahora, a las 10 minutos en Europa, 4 de la mañana en el este de los Estados Unidos y en toda la geografía cubana. Conocemos que el Premio Rafto 2024, que lo entrega la Fundación Rafto desde el año 1987 y que tiene como objetivo resaltar la lucha en pos de los derechos humanos de aquellas personas que se entregan en cuerpo y alma, precisamente con el objetivo de que los derechos humanos estén presentes y se respeten allí, en cada uno de los lugares. Ha sido entregado a Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara, un cubano que desde el año 2021 sufre prisión por el solo hecho de expresar sus opiniones, por el solo hecho de querer de que Cuba sea un país diferente al que tenemos hoy. Insisto, esta es la noticia a esta hora. Otorgan Premio Rafto 2024 de este año, ahora está, al cubano Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara. A Luis Manuel Alcántara, reconocimiento y el mensaje desde los lugares donde estemos cada uno de nosotros para que sepa que seguimos al tanto de su suerte y que, como que no, estamos junto a él, al menos todos aquellos cubanos que respetamos y que queremos una Cuba diferente. Decía que respetamos los derechos humanos y que queremos que se respeten los derechos humanos en Cuba. Durante la jornada de hoy, más adelante, justo a las 11:30 del este de los Estados Unidos y de toda la geografía cubana, regresaremos por acá para ampliar esta información que se está produciendo, que se produjo justo ahora. El otorgamiento del Premio Rafto 2024 a Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara. Premio que reconoce la labor de individuos, también de organizaciones, en pos de reconocimiento y el respeto de los derechos humanos. Buenos días. Y no se olvide, regresamos a las 11:30.
Me voy para Malecón, me cueste lo que me cueste, me voy
Lo que
para la
hacemos
calle.
es arte. Lo que hacemos es querer poner a Cuba en el siglo XXI y ellos quieren tener a Cuba en una dictadura de los años 50. Y es donde nosotros como artistas estamos conectados y decidimos apostar nuestro arte, nuestras vidas, por la libertad creativa, por la libertad del arte, pero por la libertad de todos los cubanos, que significa yo poder traducir, yo poder representar en mi arte las dolencias, las miserias que se viven en Cuba y se viven en cualquier lugar del mundo. Lo que pasa es que me tocó Cuba como territorio. Sincronizarnos todos juntos, o cada uno en sus diferencias, y sincronizar el barco, perfilarlo en pro de la democracia y la Cuba que queremos.